In this video, we will be looking at evaluating piecewise functions. A piecewise function is a function in which the formula used depends upon the domain the input lies in. We notate this idea like we have a function and we could have several formulas, but we say we use this first formula depending on the input, which is the domain or the x values. A great example is how cell phone companies and other companies sometimes charge for different things. So for example, a cell phone company uses the function below to determine the cost, C, in dollars for G gigabytes of data transfer. So our cost is going to be $25 if the amount of gigabytes we use is between 0 and 2. But once we go greater than 2 or equal to 2, then we're going to have $25 plus a different amount. So let's just see how could we use it. So it says find the cost of using 1.5 gigabytes of data and then the cost using 4 gigabytes of data. So we would denote this, the cost evaluated at 1.5 gigabytes. So we have this formula. It's $25 if G, our input, is between 0 and 2, or 25 plus 10 times G minus 2 if G is greater than or equal to 2. So 1.5 is between 0 and 2, so that means I use this. So if I use 1.5 gigabytes of data, I have a fixed cost of $25. There's no work to do. That's what it says. But if I use 4 gigabytes, then I have to evaluate it at 4. And since that's greater than 2, now I have to use this formula. So I say 25 plus 10 times 4 minus 2. Again, I want to plug this value of 4 in for G. So I have 25 plus 10, 4 minus 2 is 2. So that's 25 plus 20, so that's $45. So they would charge me $45. So that's it. All you have to do is, what are you inputting? And it tells you which function to use. So let's look at this example. So we have a function, and it says use this one if your input is less than 0. It says to use x squared if we have any number that's 0 or greater. So f of negative 2. So you have to ask yourself, is negative 2 less than 0, or is it greater than or equal to 0? Well, I know that you know, if you look at a number line, negative 2 is definitely less than 0. So that means I need to use this function. So I'd say negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1. That's all there is to it. Okay, let's look at the next example. F of 2. And again, is 2 greater than 0 or less than 0? Well, it's definitely greater than 0, so I would use that part of the function. So that would be 2 squared, or 4. So f of 2 is equal to 4. Now here's the only time it could possibly, maybe trick you up. It says f of 0. Okay. This one says less than 0. No. This one says greater than or equal to 0. So that's the one we want to use. So that's 0 squared. So that's 0. So quite a few times in looking at piecewise function, they'll ask you to evaluate a function when it's equal to something. So just be careful. Let's look at this last example. All right. It says to use the absolute value, hopefully you remember what that is, if x does not equal to 0. That means any number that's not equal to 0. It says to use this one if it is equal to 0. So keep in mind this says use this function, f of x equals the absolute value of x, for any number that's not 0. So f of negative 2 is definitely not 0. So we would say, what is the absolute value of 2? I'm sorry, what's the absolute value of negative 2? And that's positive 2. And that's your answer. So what's f of 2? Again, 2 is not 0, so we would take the absolute value of 2, which is just 2. And here we go again, 0. All right, it says use this one if it's 0. Well, it just says it equals to 1. There's nothing to plug in. It says if you have 0, it's a 1. If you want to look at one other example, what if I said f of x is equal to x minus 3 or x plus 4? And let's make this one if x is between 1 and 5, and this part is if x is less than 1. Just making something up. So if I ask you what is f of 2? Well, 2 is between 1 and 5, so I would use this one. So I'd say 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. But if I ask you what f of 1 is, again, I would use this top one because this says 1 is equal to 1. So again, I would use 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. But if I were to ask you, let's see, f of negative 1. Well, negative 1 is not between 1 and 5, but negative 1 is definitely less than 1. So I would use that one. So negative 1 plus 4 is 3. So just look at the rules. This part tells you what function, what part of the function, what piece of the function to use to evaluate.